YouTube, how's it going? Nate Great 321 back again with another pickups video, and we'll call this one my Midwest Tour pickups video. I had a week off work, so I got to visit the parents back in Chicago, and while I was there I managed to hit a couple different cities in the Midwest as well as a flea market up in Wisconsin, so I'll show the pickups I got from that as well as the 3 different stores I went to. The flea market I went to is in Elkhorn, Wisconsin, so if you're in the Milwaukee or Chicago area, I highly recommend checking it out. During the summer months, I believe they have it the first Sunday of every month. It's an absolutely huge flea market, $5 entry fee, and of course there's a ton of people selling records, so I've gone I think the last 2 or 3 years, and each year I've come away with a ton of stuff. First pickup from the flea market was one of those classic rock staples that seems like everyone else has in their collection except me, so now finally I can join the club. Have Fleetwood Mac Rumors. You know, everyone seems to find this for $1 pretty easily, but for whatever reason it's eluded me for a while, so I finally found a really clean copy for cheap. So, you know, one of those ones that everyone has to have in their collection, so I picked it up. Found a good clean copy of Devo's New Traditionalists. This is their 4th studio album. Always on the lookout for Devo stuff, one of my favorite new wave bands to get. This did not come with the poster that it was supposed to come with, but it did come with the 7-inch single for Workin' in the Coal Mine, which honestly isn't really my favorite song. I really don't like this song at all, but you know, it was included and it kind of completes the package, so not going to turn that down. Devo New Traditionalists. For some reason I've really been in the mood to get some INXS stuff, check out some of their earlier stuff, you know, kind of pre-Kick and things like that, their first 4 or 5 albums. So at the flea market I managed to find a copy of, I always get this name wrong, Shabu Shuba. I believe it's their 3rd album. Pretty cool stuff, you know. There's one of those bands I never really dove into anything past their hits, and for whatever reason recently just started researching into them and really enjoyed them, so I was really glad to pick this one up. I don't usually go for greatest hits albums, but this is one I was specifically on the lookout for. This is James Taylor's greatest hits. And the reason I really wanted this one is because it has the sort of popular version of Carolina in My Mind, which is just a beautiful, gorgeous song. I love acoustic guitar on vinyl, so any kind of singer-songwriter stuff, in my opinion, sounds excellent on vinyl, and James Taylor no exception. I mean, just a ton of classics on here. It's his greatest hits, so naturally there's a bunch of classics, but really glad I finally found this, I think for like $2. And again, this is another one that is pretty common, but for whatever reason has eluded me for quite some time, so finally glad to pick up this one. An album for my very small Bruce Springsteen collection. This is The River. I'm always on the lookout for his stuff. You know, I'm not the biggest Springsteen fan, but I'm always trying to find some of his earlier albums, but for whatever reason they always seem to be pretty expensive. But I ended up finding this one I think for $5, and honestly most of the time when I see this, especially because it's a double album, it's more in the $15 to $20 range, so I'm not sure if that's normal or if the stuff around me is just a little high, but to find it for $5, you know, no brainer. And the vinyl's really good. The jacket's a little beat up, but the actual records themselves are in really good shape. Right before I went on vacation, I watched a documentary on Netflix on Jaco Pastorius. If you're a fan of him, or even if you're not a fan of him, I recommend watching it. The film was made by Robert Trujillo from Metallica. Features interviews with a lot of bassists about him. Pretty interesting story, kind of a sad story, but extremely talented bassist for sure. And so that sort of put him on my radar, and so I was on the lookout for stuff from him. And at the flea market I found a copy of Weather Report, Heavy Weather. I didn't have any Weather Report prior to this, any Jaco or anything like that. And this is pretty much the must-have as far as I can tell. This is the one that most people recommend, and it's pretty cool. Good kind of variety. I'm not as much into jazz fusion, kind of 70s stuff. This is probably a good play every once in a while, but maybe not something I'll listen to all the time. But again, I think this was maybe $5 or something like that, so no brainer, and it's like the rest of these in pretty good shape too. Another one to help fill out the Alan Parsons Project collection. This is Eve. I'll be honest, on the first listen, I didn't really like this album too much. I'll have to give it another listen, but I like Alan Parsons Project, so I'm definitely glad I picked it up. It was only, I think, $2, but honestly, probably not my favorite one I have. The last one I got at the flea market is a 12-inch single, Simple Minds, Don't You Forget About Me. Classic 80s track off the Breakfast Club soundtrack. You can see it on the back there. Backed with a brass band in African chimes, which I honestly don't think I've listened to, but I mean, you've definitely heard this song before. I'm sure all of you have heard this, and I think this is actually an extended version. I've mentioned before, I love 12-inch singles, especially 80s stuff. I've been looking for this for a while, so really glad to find it. And again, I think it was like $2, so no-brainer. Alright, so one of the 3 cities I went to in my sort of Midwest tour was Cincinnati. I went there for a baseball game, see the Reds versus Cubs. But I got there early enough to check out one record store. There's actually a ton of record stores in the Cincinnati area. I really wish I had more time. But the one I did check out when I was there was Shake It Records, which I think is one of the more prominent ones in the city. Pretty cool store. They got a lot of CDs, if that's your thing. The whole ground level is all CDs, and then in the basement they have vinyl. In my opinion, it wasn't as big as I was expecting, but they had some decent stock. I think if you like indie alternative stuff, especially 90s stuff, they have a lot more of that than I typically see at most record stores. Prices seemed okay, condition was pretty good. So if you're in the area, definitely check it out, in my opinion. I got 2 records at Shake It Records, first of which is a 12-inch single. This is Depeche Mode, Get the Balance Right. Love that album artwork. This has an extended kind of club mix, combination mix they call it. And then B-side has The Great Outdoors, a live version of Tora Tora Tora, as well as the edited mix of Get the Balance Right. And one of Depeche Mode's really popular early songs. I love Depeche Mode, but I don't see a ton of it. And I originally wasn't going to pick this up because I thought this song was on one of their full-length albums, so I figured, I'll just hold off and I'll get that later. But thankfully I decided I'll just buy it, and then after researching it afterwards, turns out it's not on the studio album. I have a best of album that does have that song on it, but really glad to get the 12-inch single. Like I said, the unique artwork and kind of the extended mix. And in my opinion, it sounds better on the 12-inch 45. So really cool pickup here, Depeche Mode, Get the Balance Right. The second album I got at Shake It is yet another one to add to the Devo collection. This is Are We Not Men, We Are Devo. Their first album. Definitely sounds like Devo. If you're not familiar with this, it's a lot more guitar heavy, sort of punk-ish than the more synth kind of, whip it, those songs that everybody knows. But still really cool energy on this album, just really great driving tracks, quirky, weird, everything Devo is. One of my favorites that I have in my collection for sure. I've been looking for this for quite a while and finally found it. Good price and good shape too, so glad to add it to the Devo collection. The next stop in the Midwest tour is Indianapolis. As I was driving back from Cincinnati, I had a little spare time, so I decided to stop into Luna Records in Indianapolis. This is a really cool shop, probably about 50-50 used and new stuff. It seems like they sort of cater to the new stuff a little more. All the used records were in crates on the floor, so it was a little hard to dig through them. The variety, they had sort of the typical sort of classic rock staples you see, so there was nothing super rare. They had a section that had some collectible stuff. I didn't look through that, but that had a little more of the kind of higher priced albums. I did manage to pick up 3 while I was there, including 2 that have been on my want list for quite some time. Alright, the first one I got, this was not one of the ones that were really on the want list. This is just kind of a bonus pickup. This is Soft Cell, Non-Stop Erotic Cabaret, sort of a new wave staple, one of those first albums that really defined the sound. Honestly, not my favorite thing. I don't like a lot of the kind of club, new wave type music, and this is really that. This is really over the top, really in your face, just sort of everything about it. With songs like Sex Dwarf on here, I mean, you kind of know what you're getting into here. But still, entertaining and at least good for the fact that it's one of those new wave staples that everyone seems to have in their collection. So for the price, I figured why not. And when I go to record stores, usually the first section I check is the new arrivals bin, because usually the best stuff is going to be there. It's going to get snatched up before it gets into the normal bins. I didn't see it at first when I walked in, but as I was leaving the store, I ran across the new arrivals bin, and that's where I found the 2 records I was really glad to pick up on this trip. First of which is Kraftwerk Computer World. Pretty much wraps up the Kraftwerk collection, at least personally. I'm probably not going to try to seek out some of the really early stuff. This isn't my favorite of theirs. I tend to like, Man Machine and Trans Europe Express a little more, but still great classic kind of Kraftwerk sound to this. Very electronic, very interesting stuff. Not everyone's cup of tea, but huge Kraftwerk fan and really like this album. And I found it I think maybe a year ago at a store in Georgia and passed up on it for whatever reason, and I've been kicking myself ever since because I haven't seen it since then until now. And so now when I found it, yeah, I'm not going to let it pass the second time, so I decided to pick it up. Alright, and this one is definitely one of the favorites I picked up when I was on vacation, if not my favorite. I see this guy's other stuff all the time, but I have never ran across a copy of Texas Flood until now. Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble, absolute blues rock classic. If you are at all curious about blues or anything like that, please seek this out. This sounds fantastic on vinyl. Such a talented guitarist. Tragically passed away before his time, but fantastic album. So stoked to finally have this one. The final city I went to on my Midwest tour was Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I checked out a couple record stores, but the only one that I bought anything from was Bullseye Records, which reppin' the t-shirt, kind of a Beach Boys Pet Sounds look to it. Not the biggest store, so they don't have as much quantity, but the quality of stuff they had was really surprising. I was finding a lot of great stuff, you know, good mix of classic stuff and sort of newer 80s stuff, so really right up my alley. And so I had to leave some stuff behind, definitely, but managed to grab 3 really cool records from Bullseye. Another one for the Peter Gabriel collection. This is his second self-titled album, otherwise known as Scratch. The vinyl's a little beat up and the jacket's not the best, but for the price, I think it was like $5. I figured why not. I didn't have this one yet, so usually whenever I find Gabriel solo stuff, I'll go ahead and pick it up. I mentioned earlier in the video that I was on the lookout for some of the earlier INXS stuff, and wouldn't you know it, I managed to find INXS's first album at Bullseye. Jacket and record in great shape. There's a little remainder hole right here, but I don't really care about that. So pretty quickly, I'm already starting to build an INXS collection. And the last one I got on the trip, this is one that I've been looking for quite a long time. A band that I never see their stuff, but finally ran across a good copy of Echo and the Bunnymen, Porcupine. I have Ocean Rain. I bought that probably a year ago, and been looking out for this and the first one. I think it's called Crocodiles, if I'm right. Been looking out for those 2 ones ever since and just never see them, but finally found a really good copy of it at Bullseye in Milwaukee. This and Stevie Ray, probably the 2 favorite ones I got when I was on vacation. So that's it for this episode. Thanks for watching again, guys, and for now, this is Nate Great 321, signing out.